Victoria here. Today, let's talk about fear. Fear is such a powerful motivator. All of the negative emotions are actually very powerful things: guilt, shame. But today, we're talking about fear. And fear is great for some things, protects us from evils and things like that. Fear of walking down an alley by yourself in a bad neighborhood, for example. Why? Because maybe it'll protect you from something bad happening, right? The fear I'm talking about today is the fear of not doing something because of external things, external people's opinions, um, things like that. So, for example, coming out of the closet, for example, coming out as trans, for example. Um, lots of those lots of those behaviors of whether we're going to do something is controlled by our fear. And some of that fear is warranted. you know, fear of persecution. If you are come out as trans in a country that doesn't allow that, or has laws that laws where they don't protect us or imprison us, for example, um, that's a legitimate fear. But aside from those things, obviously, because that's when fear is something that protects us, fear of other people's opinions, fear of not being ourselves because we're afraid of whether Joe Bob down the street will be cool with us or not. Whether our drinking buddies or our hunting friends or our bowling team accepts us or doesn't accept us, and all of that stuff. And I know for myself, I'm never controlled by fear. I can definitely take account of it, but I feel that living myself was always so much more powerful than the negative emotions and the negative implications, the consequences, you will call them, from coming out. And I always saw the opposite of the negative. I was always motivated by the positive things, the hope, the joy, the love, the gratitude, the feelings of acceptance. Those were the things that really motivated me when I came out. Um, I took account of the guilt that I was going to inflict my coming out on other people, my kids, for example. And I know for a lot of people in our community, um, especially those with children, um, this feeling of guilt um, is very pervasive. And how if I come out, I'm going to ruin my children's lives. And I always think to myself in that way, what if the opposite? What if you don't come out and you become resentful and you become a shell of yourself, and you are not leading by example for your children, which is the parents' probably most important job, aside from clothing and feeding them, and housing them. Um, outside of that, as parents, we are the first and best example to our children. So getting back to fear, I was never motivated by it. I was like, well, it's a possibility. Everything could go to shit. But I wasn't looking at that. I was looking at, what about the possibilities? What about the good? What about the feelings of finally being myself? I remember talking to my doctor the very first time I said the word transgender to another human being. And I said, all I want to do, my minimum line of success, is to live one day as myself. One day. I just want to be me for one day. And that would have been good enough. The line of meeting the requirements of what I wanted at the bare minimum was to just be me, even if it was just for a day. So, of course, I was giving up all of these other things, and there was fear of so many things, but the line of success was so low. And so I wasn't really fearful, or at least the fear that I had wasn't strong enough to make me not go through with it, anyways. And not being controlled by fear is really what it's all about. I am a master of mitigating negatives. I will see situations, I think it's my ADHD and my neurodivergence and all this other stuff, but my brain will play out a scenario or a million scenarios, and I always go from the worst case scenario, and then I start discounting those things. And then anything that's a potential negative, I will try to mitigate or minimize the chance of that bad thing happening. So, for example, I drive really aggressively, but I won't drive really aggressively in the snow or in the rain. Why? Because it's mitigating risk. And so I was very good at mitigating or minimizing the negatives or the worst case scenarios. And as a result of that, I was able to not let fear control my behaviors. In the end, I only get one chance to live this life. I would much rather live it as myself with any number of consequences than live somebody else's life, even if it had no consequences. A million years of living as somebody else is not worth one day of living as myself. Why? Because why would I live somebody else's life? And that makes no sense to me. So I think some of the concepts of fear and how I see fear controlling people, um, people are so afraid of what could happen, what all the bad things that could happen if they come out, if they tell their boss they're trans, if they tell their wife they're trans, or whatever. But the reality is, you're already living a lie if you're trans and your wife doesn't know, and you're currently living somebody else's life anyways. How valuable is that? Right? Um, and I think that's why fear is such a negative and such a powerfully negative motivator and controller of behavior, because it doesn't actually lead to good things. It can protect you from something bad happening, but it almost never leads to a good result. Being motivated by love or by happiness or by being authentic or by accepting other people and loving other people and being generous and all of those things, they always lead to good things. They never, almost never lead to bad things. Sometimes bad things happen even in good circumstances, but for the most part, people who are motivated by powerfully strong, positive emotions, those are the people that get to experience life and love and happiness and joy. And those people that are controlled by fear and guilt and shame and hate, when does that ever lead to a good result? It never does. You may be able to alleviate some potential negatives. You may be controlled by other people's expectations. You are almost never going to have a good result when you're motivated by negative things. And so maybe the lesson that I would love to instill upon people is to focus on the good, focus on the positive, focus on the hope and the love and the joy and the happiness and the potential for all of the good things that can happen when you put your mind and your heart and your soul into good things and good people and into yourself. And when you have that as your motivator and that as the thing that drives your soul, only good things can come from that. So with that, love you all.